Hi everyone, artist Elizabeth Whelan here, talking from my studio on Chappaquiddick Island off the coast of Massachusetts. And today's topic is meaningful still life, adding depth and a personal voice to your still life painting and drawing. So a still life usually involves a painting or drawing of commonplace objects, and that can be like food and flowers or man-made objects like vases or trinkets or collectibles. And it was traditionally seen as a lower form of art than portraiture or landscapes, in part because you're doing a painting or drawing of a scene that you've set up, and people really didn't see what the big deal in that was. Of course, my view is that it's not necessarily always what you're painting, but how you're painting it that makes a work of art amazing. And if you think of some of the Impressionist work, for example, even though they were painting bowls of fruit, those are definitely significant works of art. However, you can definitely elevate your own still life by adding some meaning to that. So, meaningful, what does that mean? It means communicating something that is not directly expressed, or it could mean having a recognizable, involving recognizable symbols and signs that we understand how to interpret, or also having a serious, important, or useful quality or purpose. So I'm going to show you some examples of meaningful still life and give you some ideas of ways that you could interpret your own work in a similar vein. Before we start, I just wanted to review this really quickly. I'm going to talk every now and again during the course of this about a no-tan, looking at a drawing or painting from the point of view of the light and dark patterns which help it make a solid composition. So this is just a term I use a lot. If you're looking at a scene and you want to sort of be able to interpret it like this in these patterns of light and dark, squinting is the way to make that happen. So if you squint at something right now, you can really see the dark forms and the light forms against each other. Usually when I start a drawing or a sketch, I start off by taking whatever the objects are or the scene that I'm going to draw or paint, and I do squint and make a little notan and look at that and go, hey, is this good design? Is this dynamic? Is there something interesting going on here between the light and the dark areas? And most successful art that I have seen does that in some way or another. So anyway, that's just a little bit to start off with. Likewise, composition for a still life. It's often good to have a variety of shapes. Here I'm showing something conical, something square, something circular, close up. In the distance, you can lay them out, but in a way such as overlapping or grouping certain objects together. These are just sort of some go-to ways to compose a scene, but by no means are they the only way to go about it. So if we look way back, and this is way back to 15th century BC, here's a still life that was found in the tomb of Mena in Egypt. And really, if you look at this, it's a very modern looking piece, isn't it? This could be something that we would see for sale in an art gallery today. So the idea of still life, of showing the food that we eat, the fish that we catch, and sort of laying it all out like that visually is obviously something that's interested human beings for a long time. Now here we have a Roman fresco from sometime around 63 to 79 AD. So we're talking hundreds of years between the last piece of art and this one. And yet we can get some clues, can't we, from what was going on in Rome at the time. Glass bowls, pomegranates, grapes, the amphora tipped over on the side, amphora being a vessel for carrying wine or water. So even though this isn't perhaps something that was created as more than a decorative piece at the time, it tells us a lot about what life was like back in Roman days. So now let's move 15 or 1600 years into the future. And we've got Peter Klaas and his really amazing still life. He did quite a bit of still life work. He was really well known for it. Really sumptuous and ornate types of arrangements. And here's an example for, if you just want to squint at this scene and have a look at the light and dark, the notan basically of a scene like this. It's really quite powerful with that light coming in above from the upper left-hand side. And it's hard to know if there was a particular meaning, so to speak, but behind this, other than just uh, the feast, all the various fruit, the breads, the crab, etc. Just a really gorgeous piece. And now here we have Roy Lichtenstein. And I don't know exactly when this was done, but I think it was around the 70s, 1970s. And these are items from his studio. And they tell a story themselves, you know, the kind of palette perhaps that he was using. Obviously, these are his paint brushes, and he may have ground his own pigments for or something of that sort because he has a mortar and pestle there. So that's a little bit of a clue. You know, he's got his fabric draped and the flowers at the back. So once again, some clues and possibly meaning to him that we can't necessarily interpret by looking at it. So now we go from those types of still life, which are all very pleasant to look at, very well painted and created. We don't necessarily know what the symbolism and meaning was behind all of the objects in those paintings. We move from that to this entire genre called vanitas paintings that are full of symbolism and meaning. So here we've got this definition from Encyclopedia Britannica, and let me read this to you. So vanitas, from the Latin vanitas, meaning vanity. A vanitas painting contains collections of objects symbolic of the inevitability of death and the transience and vanity of earthly achievements and pleasures. It exhorts the viewer to consider mortality and to repent. The vanitas evolved from simple pictures of skulls and other symbols of death and transience, frequently painted on the reverse side of portraits during the late Renaissance. It had acquired an independent status by circa 1550 and by 1620 had become a popular genre. Its development until its decline about 1650 was centered in the Netherlands, an important seat of Calvinism, which emphasized humanity's total depravity and advanced a rigid moral code. So artists love this stuff, really. I mean, yes, you've got all the moral story and all of that sort of thing, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that goes in a vanitas painting, and we're going to have a look at that. So common vanitas symbols included skulls, rotten fruit, bubbles, talking about the brevity of life, smoke, watches, hourglasses, and timepieces, musical instruments, fruit, flowers, butterflies, and other insect life. A peeled lemon is a common theme. Like life, attractive to look at but bitter to taste. Dying or decaying matter and flowers, and then perilous nature, you know, snakes, poison mushrooms, spiders, that kind of thing, scorpions, and bird skeletons or dead birds, which is about vanity and the shortness of life. So for an artist, there's quite a lot of material here to work with. Now we've got this amazing painting that I use as an example of a really over-the-top vanitas painting. So this is Allegory of Vanity, and it contains, it's chock full actually of various different symbols. Seven skulls, playing cards, jewelry, armament and armor, the candle, timepieces and hourglass. It's almost out. It goes on and on. This is an extraordinary piece to look at up close, and I would love to be able to see it in person, although I've only ever seen a very high resolution image online. If you go to Wikipedia and search for Antonio de Pereda's Allegory of Vanity and have a good look at that, you can probably find even more items in there. So this was a relatively large piece. It's 55 by 69 inches, and it's really quite amazing. And that same theme here in a more simplified form, but you can see how the themes are the same. You know, we've got the skull, we've got the musical instrument, the book, you know, the amphora for whatever reason. We've got the lamp, the oil lamp with just a wisp of smoke. We have a turned upside down bowl or trug, which would have been for collecting fruit and vegetables, but is now empty. So all of these various symbols, and once again, that beautiful light coming in from the upper left-hand side. So that was really stylistically very strong. And if you squint at this and look at the notan, in other words, the dark and light arrangement, this is a really strong design on top of having all of this, all of these symbols in it. So I wanted to also include this. This is a photograph, an enhanced photograph, probably enhanced in Photoshop or something like that, by an artist that goes by the name, or photographer that goes by the name of Mark Scheider. I'm not sure if this is his real name, but his work can be found online. And I thought this was fantastic. Actually, if you look up vanitas right now, you find that photographers have really taken over this genre in modern day and have done some really gorgeous and very similarly lit pieces that are reminiscent of those early Flemish paintings with the evocative lighting and then all of the same types of symbols. The skull, money, documents. We have the cigar that has burned out. We have the timepiece in the calendar. Just a really great piece, don't you think? And so I'm just going to follow that peeled lemon theme for a bit, and also the glass tipped over. For a number of different reasons, you'll often see a glass tipped over, a wine bottle tipped over, meaning that the glasses run dry. There is no more. We're not pouring the glass full of the fruit of life. So here we have Roy Lichtenstein with a still life, one of his prints, and so this is hundreds of years later, but involving the same kind of theme. And here we have Michael Naples, who did a painting, Peeled Lemon with Antique Books. And I love this because the lemon is obviously, it's been sitting there for a while. So he was probably painting this from life. And that lemon is definitely showing the fact that it's on the outs rather than being nice and fresh. And I think that goes really well with the antique books. So Roy Lichtenstein did a few more pieces with lemons in them, and although these aren't peeled ones, I just included them because they were interesting, and also because this sketch I thought was eye-watering in the price that it realized at auction in 2012 of $134,500. I mean, that's really quite incredible. So the two sketches show little bit different placement with the windmill, how he was going to arrange the design. And here is the final print. And there are 100 prints that he made. One of them went for $25,000 at the 2014 Christie's auction. And he evidently went with the windmill that was a bit smaller. And once again, lemons. So that was just a little bit of a tangent, but I thought that was kind of cool. Um, when we do think about still life, a lot of still life is not imbued with that kind of meaning that a vanitas has. In this particular case, this is just a gorgeous arrangement by Claude Monet, still life with melon, and we have here we have the triangular conical shape, the round shape, an oval shape, the grapes leading off the edge, beautiful unity created by the shadows at the back. So a still life does not have to be imbued like a vanitas painting with layers of meaning. It can still be gorgeous just for what it is. Likewise, Pablo Picasso, La Cafetière. I'm not quite sure what all of the objects are in here, but I think I see cheese and maybe I'm not quite sure, maybe some small pies and some soup or something like that. This is wonderful. Look at all that great color, fantastic design. If you squint at it and look at it from a notan point of view, that's a really tight design. We don't necessarily know if Picasso had a particular idea or some sort of meaning in mind that he was trying to get across, or was this just about the design and about the color? David Ratner, on this still life here, is exploring texture and shape and color and that sort of thing, and not necessarily a meaning that we are picking up from the symbols and such that he's using. So still life can obviously cover quite a bit of ground. There are an awful lot of different ways that artists can explore objects, arrangements of objects and colors and such, but there are also ways to add a little bit more depth to what's going on. And Todd Casey does a lot of this. For example, here he is calling this piece a world of ideas. And between the globes and the magnifying glass and the notes and the maps that are laid out, you can certainly start to get a feeling of a theme. And I just love this because of the different the sizes and shapes. And if you're talking about composition, look at those globes. They form a triangular area over on the left. There are obviously circles, and then you've got kind of a square or rectangular shape with the two left-hand globes. So I think that, and then shadows tying everything together. If you squint to look at this from a notan point of view, that's really good design. So now we're starting to get to a bit more meaning, where the title of the piece is giving us some hints about what was going on in the artist's mind and why they were why they made this arrangement and used these particular objects. And you'll start to find in modern pieces a lot of, just like the lemons, a lot of other symbols. The blown out candle. Not only is that a symbol of life sort of passing by, but it's also just a beautiful symbol to use in general, the wisp of smoke and that sort of thing. And Daniel Green, who unfortunately just passed away really shortly, is well known as a portrait artist, but also just a fabulous pastel artist. This is a pastel painting. And he used various different objects that he just thought were extremely interesting, repeating patterns, the colors, the depth of colors, the arrangement, and also these game boards that he collected. He collected vintage and antique game boards of different sorts. I think this is Parcheesi, I'm not quite sure. So to him, there was personal meaning to do with the objects that he put into the paintings, but perhaps not necessarily a message to the viewer as to what those symbols and such were or what the meaning was. But I love the lushness and the richness of the colors in this. Now here we've got Samuel Hung's family of trinkets, and these are most likely to be objects from around his studio or home. And they're wonderful pieces. These little pieces show up in other work that he does as well. So once again, perhaps not a symbol like a vanitas, but something that has personal meaning to him. These objects may be things either from his childhood, growing up, remind him of certain people or certain places. So the meaning doesn't have to necessarily be for the viewer. I'm always telling artists you're creating artwork for yourself first. And so the artwork should be something that has meaning to you, whether they're objects from your own personal past, whether they're objects that have a certain theme. In this case, these are tied together by color as well as sort of an interesting arrangement. And now I'd like, and I don't know what that is on the front lip there by the two matches, but it looks like a gummy bear or something. So who knows what that's doing in there. But I'd like to point out the teeny tiny little duck that you can see up on the top row there by the little robot figure. And I'll show you why. So here's another still life that Samuel Hung did. And this is just fantastic. He did a few of these. This is Imposters number 3, Ducks, Lemons, and Candy Corn. And there's that teeny tiny little duck at the far left. And I thought this was wonderful because to begin with, it's imaginative. It's a good design overall, regardless. The repeating color, the repeating shapes and forms, and just the creativity of deciding to dress up this lemon and have it look like the duck. So meaningful, perhaps to him in terms of what the message was he was trying to get across. Just interesting to the viewer in general, and just really wonderful, the whole idea of imposters. Now here's another kind of still life, and it definitely has meaning to it. Steve Mills does these huge paintings, very, very detailed, and they are often of close-ups of objects, and in this particular case, he has done quite a series that are close-ups of newspapers or magazines, and usually financial types, like the Wall Street Journal or Financial Times. In this case, the name of the painting, Strong Dollar, comes from a headline on one of the papers. So here's a good example of meaningful still life. If you think about your own life and what's going on in your life right now, things that are going on in the news, what's happening around us, there are ways to create still life paintings that take from our current life, our current history, and pull together objects that you can make an interesting design and painting or drawing from, or even just sketch in your sketchbook. It doesn't have to be a full-blown painting or anything. To capture our personal history or your personal history, your past, perhaps your family's past, your interests. There are a number of ways to go about accumulating objects for a still life, making it really good design. I mean, if you squint at this and look at it from the no-tan point of view, wonderful shapes and the way he's cropped this whole scene to make a good painting or a good drawing that still is imbued with a sense of personal meaning. Now, Doug Strickland did this painting. It's called Framer's Tools. And if you look down at the lower right, where it's quite dark, you can see the corner of a picture frame. So he's telling you there the type of frame that he's using. And these are probably his tools or the tools of the framer. Kind of a slice of life of modern day. And the way he's gone about it is not a super hyper realistic type of painting like those vanitas we saw earlier, but certainly it captures a moment in time. And there will be a time in the future where these tools will seem very vintage and out of date, whereas right now, you know, a circular saw of this kind of design and these tools seem to us pretty regular to have in a workshop. And likewise, Anke Claassen has painted a number of paintings of different types of tools. She's got a completely different color palette, doesn't she? Much lighter, much more crisp, and a really interesting sense of design, not trying to make a scene per se, but using the actual shapes of the objects and sort of the monochrome uniformity of all of these plasterers' tools and the shadows that are created in order to have just a really beautiful layout. So meaning can also mean just a unity of subject, a unity of theme. In this particular case, the plasterer's tools. It doesn't necessarily have to have a deeper sort of symbolic meaning other than that. So I want to end right now in terms of showing you artwork, with this really great piece by Larry Brooks, and it's called The Weight. So if we think about this, we look at the rocks piled up on the right, and we look at the flower on the left, and really, it takes maybe a second to realize that the scales should be tipped in a different direction. So the weight, are we waiting for the scales to tip? Is it the weight, as in W-E-I-G-H-T, that kind of weight? What exactly is going on here? And I really think this is a marvelous piece because not only is it a nice layout, I mean, once again, squint at it, look at the design, gosh, that's really good. It's nicely balanced overall in terms of shapes, but it also has a deeper meaning, a deeper concept that we have to think about. Now, that concept isn't necessarily going to be readily apparent. I don't think that Larry Brooks wants us to go, oh, that's what that painting is about. But he does want us caught in that moment, waiting for something to happen, wondering why, thinking about this, having a look and wondering what could this possibly mean. So your meaning, so to speak, in your meaningful still life doesn't have to be obvious. It may be ambiguous on purpose. It could be that you and the artist have completely different ideas about what the painting is about. So this is a wonderful way to end, because we do think of still life as being about objects that we can see, and then we go, yes, that's a skull, that's a coffee cup, that's a bowl of fruit. But you can take all of those very realistic objects, you can paint them in non-realistic ways, you can paint them in abstract ways, you can imbue a scene with an overall sense of meaning, or you can use symbols that actually have individual meaning unto themselves. So back again to meaningful, the definition, communicating something that is not directly expressed, like a whole sense of the shortness of life. having recognizable function in a logical language or other sign system. So that includes common or understood symbols like we saw in the vanitas, but it also includes things like those scales. We know something should happen with those scales. Or having a serious, important, or useful quality or purpose. And that could be meaning such as showing somebody in future generations what framers' tools look like, or plasterers' tools look like, or it could have some other concept that you're trying to get across. All of these things, if you think about them in the course of putting together your still life, you can probably find things from your own life that just looking around your studio or your home that you could join together to make some kind of interesting and meaningful artwork that's meaningful to yourself and perhaps to others also. All right, just to wrap up, meaningful still life, add your own voice to your paintings or drawing. So the symbolism can be personal, it can be classical, it can be themes that are important to you, themes that reflect what's happening around you, objects that tie together in some way that is personal, memories or hopes, hopes for the future, hopes for your children or grandchildren's future, other people in the future, your personal philosophy. There are so many different ways you can go about making your artwork have meaning. So it is perfectly okay just to paint the flower in the vase or the bowl of fruit. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Each of those things is an exploration of still life in their own right. But there's also a way to take your own still life drawing and painting to the next level. And to help you, if you'd like to incorporate some symbols into your own painting or your own interpretation of some of the symbols, here are some useful reference books. Nature and Its Symbols, A Guide to Imagery, Dictionary of Subjects and Symbols in Art, an illustrated encyclopedia of traditional symbols, and the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols. And there are more. There are quite a few more, as a matter of fact, but these are just four I happen to have in my own library. And what they do is it's not sort of pictures of things, it's descriptions, mostly descriptions of the types of things that you will see in a painting. For example, say it was lilies or swords or playing cards, that kind of thing. It would give you an idea of what those symbols mean. And also, for example, say you wanted to depict time in some manner, various different objects that are used to depict time, so that you can start to get some clues, not only for your own work, but when you're looking at other work in museums or by other artists, how they employed symbols to get a different and deeper layer of meaning across. So I hope you'll find that these are useful. Good luck. I'm sure that you're going to be able to come up with some interesting concepts and ideas yourself for your own still life. Thank you so much for joining me today.